there's not a lot of really good places for kids to go get advice um, in the real world. So I thought, well, maybe I can sort of sum up my 2 cents and what's got me to where I am today. Um, a lot of people ask me questions like, you know, what did I listen to when I was growing up? Who my favorite players are? What kind of gear to use? And we'll try to cover that in the 15 minutes that we've got here. But to start off with, I think that the best advice that I feel like I could give any musician, not just guitar players, but especially guitar players, is if you want to make a living, guys, learn everything that you can. Never, ever stop learning. I grew up, my dad was a country artist, and he his steel guitar and lead guitar and fiddle and banjo and mandolin and whatever else you want to pick up player was my teacher. And David was a session cat, which is what I wanted to do. I always looked at the records first thing to find out who was playing on the record more than I cared about who cut the record a lot of times. Which is why bands were always a huge thing for me, like the Beatles and the Stones, guys like that, guys who went in and played on their own stuff. But of course, being a session player, I also got into guys like Steve Lukather, Reggie Young. Reggie Young was huge for me. Larry Carlton, Larry. That kind of stuff. So learn everything you can, every kind of style. I would play with Jimmy Church in the gyms at Tweetsie Railroad for a summer gig, or play with them on Friday nights at a country gig somewhere, and then turn around and go to my buddy Tim Lynch's house on Sundays where they were playing straight up metal. And then when I was a senior in high school, on top of those gigs, as well as playing with guys like Charlie Hayworth and Russell Eller and playing with Jeff Michaels, which got me into playing bluegrass a lot more. It not only got me a lot more gigs because I could cover so many bases, but I found that there were certain techniques that I could switch over from one form to the other just by what I wanted my guitar to sound like. So that's one big thing, is listen to everything that you can and develop an appreciation for it. You might not have to like it, but learn to appreciate it. Practice. That's a really hard question for me to answer on how much is enough. I don't think you can ever practice enough personally. I know I used to drive girlfriends nuts when I was growing up because we'd be talking on the phone, and in the background, they'd hear me sitting back there fooling around on a guitar. And several times I was asked, are you going to talk to me, or are you going to play that guitar? And several times I said, I think I'll play guitar. Didn't do much for my dating life, but so I don't think you can ever practice too much. Now, of course, general rules are, if you feel pain, stop. Get yourself a good trick bag. That's what I like to call it. I'm not by any means what I would consider a brilliant guitar player, like Steve Lukather or Larry Carlton or Brent Mason or Reggie Young or Jerry Reed or any of the cats that really tripped my trigger and got me into guitar. But I feel like my claim to fame is that I'm a chameleon. I can slide into a situation and fit into that situation, which brings me to my next point. As a musician, and not just a guitar player, but as a musician, the most important thing you can do is listen. Right here, these things right here, that's why God gave you two of those and one mouth. So the most important thing you can do is listen. Learn how to play for the song. Now, and I'm guilty of it too. Sometimes I'll just go off into shred territory, just And it's fun. It really is. It's a blast to do that kind of stuff. But a friend of mine once told me, a boss that I worked for, he asked me if I thought I got paid by the note. And that kind of made me think. It's not always about flash. Sometimes just doing something really simple and really pretty, like something like a bend, can be as effective as running a scale at 50,000 miles an hour. What I think you want to do is find notes and phrases that not only complement the song, because a solo is basically a song within the song. You're just taking over the lead singer slot for less than 30 seconds. So you have to have the ability to play for the song. And if you'll listen, the song will tell you exactly what needs to be done. But you just have to listen. Something else that I think you can do is to learn other instruments. I also play drums, keyboard, mandolin. Play enough pedal steel to know I should never play it in public. But I know enough pedal steel to... I wouldn't be a pedal steel player, but I could take a tally and fake some steel stuff if I needed to. And I've several situations where I've had to do that. So learn other instruments. It helps if you know what the bass player's doing. It helps if you know what the drummer's doing. If you're a lead guy, it helps to know what the rhythm guitar player's doing. If you're a rhythm guitar player, it helps to know how to stay out of the way of the keyboard player. So listen to everybody. And that's another thing too. Develop a strong sense of time. A lot of times as guitar players, especially when we're doing chunk parts, we have a tendency to push that. I know I'm as guilty of it as everybody else is. Drum machines are cheap now. I know Digitech. Gotta put in the plug for Digitech. The new time bender delay that I'm trying out for them. I know that a lot of the Digitech pedals and other pedals out there, the multiprocessors, have built-in drum machines, which is a lot better to work with than the old boring metronomes that we used to have. But even if it's a metronome, work on your timing. Work on stuff slow, and then build up. Build up to speed. Build up to where you want it at. To where it's like being an athlete. It's all muscle memory. Once you get your fingers going where you want them to go, then the rest of it's just knowing where to use it, when to do it. And another thing about being a guitar player is knowing when not to play, which is something that took me years, I think, to learn. And sometimes I'm still guilty of overplaying, but I love to shred. And that's not a bad thing, but make sure that when you are shredding, it's appropriate for the song. Gear-wise, I've got a lot of expensive gear. If you've seen my pedal board, you'll know that my pedal board is ridiculous. You don't need all that stuff. You really don't need it to play. You don't need to go out and spend $2,000 and $3,000 on a guitar. What I have right here is a Squier by Fender, classic vibe 60s Tele. Looks like an old 60s Tele custom with the binding and everything. And other than the fact that it's still got nines on it, and some of my bends are a little wacky because I play 9.5s, and yes, there is a huge difference between the two. I'd take this guitar out to a gig. I'd have no problem with it. Tone is in your hands, and it's in your head. And that's something else I can't stress enough, is hear it. Be able to hear it in your head, because if you can hear it here, you can play it here. So, if you're a country player, a basic setup would be your amp, a compressor, a little bit of delay, and a little bit of chorus, and an overdrive pedal. And you don't need anything crazy. And you could actually get away at a rock gig with that too. So, and of course I'm using a carbon amp, but just get yourself a decent amp. There's some good solid state amps out there. You don't necessarily have to go tube. Find what gets you your sound, what you're comfortable playing. As soon as you can, jam with other people. Jam with other people. Jam with other people. That's how you learn how to play as a group. I know kids who can sit there and rattle off 1,000,000 licks a minute, but put them in a band situation and they're completely lost. Play with other people. Have a sense of humor. This business will eat you alive. It will. I'm not saying don't trust people. You have to trust people, but have some business savvy about you. Know what you're getting into before you get into it. Be a nice guy. I can't stress that enough. Be somebody that people want to work with, want to call. Be friendly, make jokes, but go in and know your stuff too. If you're given material to learn to do a gig, then sit down and learn that material. Listen to it at least. I've seen guys walk into gigs who never even listen to the material. And when they don't listen to the material, nor do they listen to the band because they know everything, it normally turns out to be a really, really hard gig. I'm not really sure where else to go with this. That's just some thoughts off the top of my head. But since we've got a couple of minutes left, let's talk about the Squier Classic 5 Telly, shall we? I got this for Christmas, and it's a cool little Telecaster. I needed another one, and it doesn't have EMGs yet. It will, but it's turned out to be a cute little Telecaster guitar for me because I grew up predominantly as a Telecaster player. That's another thing while I'm on the subject. Learn what different amps and different guitars do together. A Tele through a Vox will sound completely different than a Tele through a Twin. A Les Paul through a Marshall will sound completely different than a Tele through that same Marshall. So, and sometimes just sit down and have fun with your guitar. Make stupid noises. When I first got my first Floyd Rose tremolo, I'd sit there and make dinosaur noises, push the strings against the pickups when it was all the way slack. Charlie Brown sounds, and when you practice, you don't necessarily have to have the guitar plugged up and running through your amps and all your pedals and stuff. Just sit there when you're in front of the television. Run some scales. Learn theory. Learn the numbers. The Nashville number system tends to be what most recording studios are using these days, unless you're doing an LA or a New York thing where there's music. And I've just recently learned to read music, but learn to read if you can. It won't hurt you. No knowledge is ever going to hurt you. Did I say that right? Knowledge on anything is never going to be bad for you. So learn all you can. This is your craft. And if you decide this is what you want to do for a living, then by all means, prepare yourself to go out in the world and do it, because there's 100,000 2711 pickers in Nashville. And like I said, have a sense of humor.